Right now, behind my house here in Okinawa, there is a chicken coop that I have not cleaned in over a year. Step inside it, and you will not smell what you expect to smell. There is no stench of ammonia that stings your eyes, no wet droppings underfoot, no cloud of flies rising as you open the door. The floor is deep and dry and soft beneath your feet, and it smells of the forest floor after rain, earthy, sweet, almost pleasant, the way good soil smells in your hands. My 12 hens are healthier than they have ever been, their feathers bright, their combs red, their eggs strong-shelled and heavy, and I have not lifted a shovel to that floor in more than 12 months. I have not scrubbed it, I have not sprayed it, I have not hauled a single wheelbarrow of filth away from it. The coop cleans itself, not by magic, I am too old to believe in magic, but by a simple method my grandfather understood in his bones, a method that the whole modern world seems to have quietly forgotten. And in just a few minutes, I am going to show you exactly how to build it for yourself. My name is Kenji Takara. I am 81 years old, and I have lived my whole life on the island of Okinawa, in the warm south of Japan. My family has kept chickens for as long as anyone in our village can remember. My grandfather kept them, and his mother before him, in a low wooden coop he built with his own 2 hands, without a single nail bought from any store. He taught me, when I was a boy small enough to gather the eggs in my shirt, that a chicken coop is not a cage you must forever clean. It is a small living system, and if you build it correctly, with understanding, it cleans itself, it feeds your soil, and it keeps your birds healthier than any bright plastic setup you can buy today. For 81 years, I have never once shoveled foul, wet muck out of a chicken house, not once in my whole life. And by the end of this video, neither will you. But before I show you how, I must tell you the part that should make you a little angry. Walk into any farm store today and look carefully at what they are selling you. Plastic coops that crack and split after 2 winters in the sun. Thin wire cages that rust through in a single year. And then, along the wall, a whole shelf of bottles and bags. Chemical coop cleaner, deodorizing spray, ammonia neutralizer, mite powder, disinfectant, fly killer, a dozen products you are told you simply must buy, again and again, month after month, just to keep your birds from falling sick in the very housing they sold you in the first place. Do you see the trap that has been laid for you? They sell you a coop that breeds filth and sickness by its very design. And then they sell you the cure for the filth and the sickness that their coop created. 2 sales instead of none. A coop that cleans itself, that costs almost nothing to build and nothing at all to maintain, is worthless to such people. There is no repeat customer in a thing that simply works, quietly, for 20 years. And so they do not tell you it exists. They let you believe that keeping a few hens must mean endless shoveling, constant scrubbing, a sore back, and a cabinet full of sprays that cost you more each year than the eggs are worth. Quick word before I begin, and I won't bring it up again. Everything I share here, there's far more of it than fits in one video. So I gathered it all into one book, the Takara Method, and right now I'm keeping it at a special price, lower than it'll normally be. The link's in the description, or point your phone at the code on screen. That's all. Now let me show you today's. Now here is where almost everyone goes wrong, and if you do not understand this one thing, your coop will stink, your birds will sicken, and you will say the old man was mistaken. So listen closely now. Most people build a chicken coop with a bare floor, bare wood, or cold concrete, or worse still, hard plastic, and then they lay down a thin scattering of straw or wood shavings on top of it, a few inches, no more, and they believe their job is to scrape it all out every week and lay down fresh again. This is the mistake. This is the whole mistake right here. A thin floor like that cannot break anything down. It has no life in it. The droppings simply sit on the surface, wet and rotting, breeding ammonia and flies and disease, until you haul them away and begin the same miserable cycle all over again. You are not keeping chickens, my friend. You are running a small, stinking sewage plant that you must empty by hand forever until you grow too old and tired to keep the birds at all. The secret, the thing my grandfather knew, the thing that farmers across old Japan and old Europe understood for centuries before the chemical companies ever came, is that you do not fight the droppings at all. You let them compost, right there on the floor, beneath the birds, inside a deep bed of exactly the right material. You build what is now called a deep litter floor. Done correctly, that floor becomes a living thing. The droppings vanish down into it and disappear. The good microbes multiply and crowd out the bad ones that cause the smell and the sickness. The birds themselves do the turning for you, all day long. And instead of a weekly chore that you come to dread, the floor becomes a slow, warm, sweet-smelling compost that you harvest just once a year, as the finest garden soil you have ever held in your two hands. But it only works if you get the very first step right, the depth of the bed and the material you fill it with. And this is exactly where every single beginner fails. The floor must be deep. That is the first rule, and the one almost everyone breaks. Not 2 inches, not 3. You begin with at least 6 inches of bedding, and over the months you will build it up to 10, 12, even 15 inches deep. This depth is not for the comfort of the birds. It is the very engine of the whole system. A shallow floor cannot hold enough living material to break down the droppings. A deep one becomes a vast, slow compost pile that quietly consumes everything the birds leave behind. Think of it not as a layer you sweep away each week, but as a garden bed you are slowly, patiently building, right there beneath your hens. And the material matters as much as the depth. You want a carbon-rich, dry, coarse bedding. And the best of all is a mix. Start with a base of coarse wood shavings, not the fine sawdust, for the fine dust packs down hard and smothers the air the bed needs to breathe. To the shavings you add dry leaves, which cost you nothing at all, and which my grandfather gathered by the sackful every single autumn of his life. You add chopped straw. Some good keepers add shredded cardboard, or dried pine needles, or spent hay. The variety is itself a secret. Different materials break down at different speeds and feed different families of microbes, and it is those countless microbes that do all the labor for you, for free, day and night. What you must avoid is anything wet, anything green, anything that mats down into a solid, airless, sodden mass. Here is why this works, and it is worth understanding, because once you truly understand it, you will never keep chickens any other way again. Chicken droppings are very high in nitrogen. The bedding, the shavings, the leaves, the straw, is very high in carbon. When you bring nitrogen and carbon together in the right balance, with air and just a little moisture, you do not get rot and stench. You get compost. The billions of good microbes in that bed feed upon the droppings and break them down into rich, dark, crumbling earth, releasing almost no smell at all as they work. It is the very same quiet process that happens on the floor of every forest on this earth, where countless deer and birds and creatures leave their droppings year after year, and yet the forest floor smells not of filth, but of sweetness and rain. You are simply bringing that forest floor inside your coop and putting it to work. Now a word about the beginning, because the first 2 weeks confuse people and they give up too soon. When you lay down a fresh, deep bed, it is not yet alive. The microbes must first arrive and multiply, and this takes a little time, perhaps 2 or 3 weeks. In those first days, you may see the droppings sitting on top, not yet vanishing, and you may fear the method has failed. It has not. Be patient. Toss your handful of grain. Let the birds scratch. Add a little dry bedding over any damp spot, and wait. By the 3rd or 4th week, the bed will have come alive, and from then on, it will simply keep working, deeper and richer, for the rest of the year. The old bed, once started, never truly stops. It only grows better with age, like a good iron pan that has been seasoned by years of use. Now, the birds themselves become your workers, and this is the part that delights me still, after all these years. Chickens scratch. It is in their very nature. They cannot help themselves. They will spend the whole of the day turning that bedding over, digging, mixing, aerating, doing for free the exact labor that a compost pile needs from a man with a fork. Every scratch of every foot mixes the fresh droppings down into the living bed where the hungry microbes wait for them. You do nothing. The hens do it all, and they are far happier for it, because scratching in a deep, rich, living bed is exactly what a chicken most loves to do in all the world. A hen kept on a bare, hard floor is a bored and sickly creature, thin-feathered and dull. A hen on a deep litter floor is doing the very work she was born to do, and you can see the health of it in her bright eye and her heavy egg. To help them along, you may throw a handful of scratch grain, cracked corn, wheat, whatever you have, across the surface of the bedding each morning. The birds will dig for every last kernel, and in digging for it, they will turn your entire floor for you, top to bottom. This is the single small task of the whole system. One handful of grain, tossed across the floor, once each day. That is the entirety of the work. A child can do it. An old man can do it. I have done it every morning for longer than I can remember, and it takes me less time than it takes to speak of it. Now let me give you the layers that most people overlook, the small things that separate a floor that works beautifully from a floor that fails and stinks. The first, and the most important of all, moisture. The bed must be damp, but it must never be wet. A properly working deep litter floor holds just a little moisture within it, like a sponge that has been wrung out, because the microbes need some water to live and to work. But if that bed ever becomes soaking wet from a leaking roof above, a spilled or dripping waterer, or rain blowing in through an open side, it will turn from sweet compost into foul black rot almost overnight. So keep your waterer raised up off the floor and set it outside the coop entirely if you can manage it, or stand it over a small tray to catch the drips. Keep your roof sound and check it after every storm, and if a patch of the bed ever does grow damp and begins to smell sour, do not panic and do not haul it all out. Simply throw a few good handfuls of dry shavings and dry leaves over that spot. The dry carbon drinks up the excess water. The microbes recover and the smell vanishes within a day. That handful of dry bedding is very nearly your only tool, and it quietly fixes almost everything that can go wrong. The second thing people overlook: ventilation. This one surprises them, for they imagine that a warm coop ought to be sealed up tight against the weather, especially through the cold of winter. But a sealed coop traps moisture inside it, and trapped moisture, as I have told you, is the enemy of the whole system and of the bird's very lungs. Your coop needs vents set up high, near the roof, above the height of the roosting birds, so that the damp air and any faint trace of ammonia can rise and escape without ever blowing a cold draft across your sleeping hens. High vents, always open, in every season of the year. My grandfather's coop had a long, narrow gap left open beneath the eaves, screened with fine mesh against the rats, and it stood open in the deep of winter and the heat of summer alike. The air moved gently through, the floor stayed sweet and dry, and his birds were never once made sick by the cold. For it is not the cold that harms a chicken, it is the damp. Remember that, and you will keep healthy birds where others lose theirs. The third layer is a quiet gift of the system that few people even know to expect: warmth. As that deep bed composts through the winter, the work of all those countless microbes gives off a gentle, steady heat, the same warmth you feel rising from a compost pile on a cold morning. A deep litter floor, working well, warms the coop from below, from the ground up, with no fire and no electricity and no cost of any kind. My grandfather's hens laid straight through the coldest weeks of the year, warm-footed on their living floor, while the neighbors' birds, on their cold, bare boards, stopped laying entirely until the spring. The floor that cleans itself also heats itself. Nothing is wasted. Everything is used twice. And the fourth, the one that turns this from a clever trick into a gift that keeps on giving: the harvest. Once each year, I do it in the early spring, when the garden calls for it. You fork out the bottom of that deep bed. Not all of it, mind you. You leave a good few inches of the old living litter behind, because it is rich with the good microbes that will start your new bed working immediately, the very way a spoonful of the old yogurt starts a fresh batch, or a piece of the old dough leavens the new bread. What you fork out from the bottom is no longer droppings and shavings at all. It is compost, dark, crumbling, sweet-smelling, some of the very richest garden soil in all the world, made for you, for nothing, by your own hens and the quiet microbes over the slow turning of a whole year. You carry it to your vegetable garden, and you dig it in, and it grows food that feeds your family through the seasons. Do you see the circle of it now? The birds feed the floor feeds the garden feeds the birds and the family both, and around it turns again. Nothing is wasted. Nothing is hauled away to be forgotten. Nothing is bought from any store. This is mottainai, the whole of it, the entire philosophy of my people, turning slowly and sweetly in a single wooden coop behind the house. Let me tell you a little more about my grandfather, for he is in every single word of this. His coop was a low and humble thing of cedar, built entirely without a single bought nail, joined at its corners in the old way, with wood cut and shaped to lock into wood. He had gathered the dry leaves for its floor every autumn of his long life, raking them from beneath the trees into great sacks, and he spoke of that floor the way another man might speak of a fine and favorite field. "Feed the floor," he would tell me in his slow and certain voice, "and the floor will feed everything else." When I was a small boy, I did not understand him at all. I thought, as most people think, that a chicken coop was simply a dirty place, a chore to be endured, a thing to hold one's breath against. It was he who showed me, patiently, over many years, that a coop built with real understanding is not a dirty place at all, that it can be the sweetest smelling corner of the entire farm and the most generous, giving eggs and meat and warmth and the richest soil and asking almost nothing back in return. He kept those birds until he was 90 years old, and in all those long years I never once saw him lift a shovel of muck. He had built something that did the work itself, quietly, faithfully, and it outlived him. The cedar coop still stands behind my house to this very day. My 12 hens live in it now, and every spring when I fork out that dark, sweet soil and carry it to my garden, I think of his hands and his voice, and I understand at last exactly what he meant. And that, in the end, is what all of this is truly about. We have been taught, all of us, to keep our animals the hard way, the wasteful way, the way that keeps us forever bent over a shovel and forever driving back to the store for another bag and another bottle. But there is another way, an older way, a wiser and a gentler way, in which you build a thing correctly just once, with understanding and with your own 2 hands, and it then serves you and your family faithfully for the rest of your life, and very often long beyond it. There is a deep and quiet dignity in that. The dignity of not depending upon the cracked plastic coop and the chemical spray. The dignity of building something that lasts, that feeds your soil instead of poisoning it, that you can one day hand down to your grandchildren the very way my grandfather handed his coop down to me. A store-bought thing breaks and is thrown away and is forgotten within the year. But a thing built well, with your own hands and your own care, becomes part of your family and carries your name forward long after you are gone. So tell me, in the comments below, where in this wide world do you live, and do you keep chickens already, or are you only dreaming of it still? Tell me your place, your flock, and what it is you are building this year with your own hands. I read every message that comes to me, every one, and I would dearly love to know who among you builds a self-cleaning floor this season and never lifts that miserable shovel again for the rest of your days. And the next time we sit together, I will show you how my grandfather built the coop itself, the low cedar house with the corners that lock together without a single nail, the joint that has held strong for 400 years across all of Japan, that any patient person can cut with nothing but a simple saw and a sharp chisel, and that will outlast anything you could ever buy in a box. Until then, waste nothing. Build it to last, And remember always that the people who lived closest to the earth understood things that we, with all our plastic and all our sprays and all our hurry, are only now beginning to remember once again.